Hey guys, so I'm back with another missing persons video. The case that I will be discussing today is the case of Hayley Marie Dodd. Her disappearance is actually considered one of Australia's most high-profile missing persons cases. First, I'm going to give you some background information for this case. Hayley was born in 1981, meaning that she was only 17 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was from Mandurah, Western Australia. The last known sighting of Hayley was on Thursday the 29th of July 1999. Hayley was hitchhiking at the time of her disappearance. At this time in 1999, it was a lot more common for people to hitchhike than what it is today, and there wasn't as much caution towards hitchhiking. At the time Hayley disappeared, she was wearing light brown hiking boots, blue denim jeans, a black V-neck top, a grey men's jacket with a hood, silver sunglasses, and she was carrying a light brown backpack with the word equip written on the flap. A week prior to Hayley's disappearance, she had arrived to the town of Dongara, which is located pretty close to the beach. This town was located about 150 kilometres away from Badingara, which was the last place that Hayley was ever sighted. At this time, she was working in the area as a roustabout with a friend. And a roustabout is like another word for a labourer, so she was working on farms and things like that, just as like a helper. Not long after Hayley arrived to Dongara, she actually decided that she wanted to leave there and go and work on another farm. This farm was actually a family friend's farm, so she was going to work there instead. The next information is about the events that happened on the day of Hayley's disappearance. Hayley is said to have started her day at around 8 AM on the day that she disappeared, and this was also confirmed by one of her friends that said that she saw her at about 8:30 in the morning, and this friend also said that she was on her way to the new farm at Badingara. She was said to have left Dongara at around 8 AM, like I said, and she was hitching a ride with another motorist. This motorist dropped her off at a phone box that was located at the Badingara Roadhouse. This town that she was travelling to is about 2 hours north of Perth, and it's a really remote town. It was about 10 AM by the time she arrived, and she made a telephone call using the phone box. Shortly after, Hayley was then given another lift by a female motorist this time to Northwest Road, and she was dropped off at around 10:30 AM. Hayley was last seen by a female motorist walking in a northeast direction towards the farm that she had said that she was going to. This was located at the corner of Wathgingara Road and Northwest Road. This was the last sighting of Hayley, and it was confirmed at 11:35 AM that morning. And this is really where the case goes cold. No one has heard or seen from Hayley since this day. It is so sad that the family has not had any closure, and it's been about 18 years since her disappearance. I cannot imagine what her family and friends must have gone through or are still going through. Now we will discuss the leads and evidence that I have found for this case. Police investigations at the time of Hayley's disappearance really failed to shed any light onto what happened on this day, and they also struggled to find any witnesses to this crime, as the area that she went missing is such a remote location. Search efforts at the time also failed, resulting in Hayley's disappearance quickly becoming one of Western Australia's most baffling unsolved missing persons cases. Hayley's mother, Margaret, has never given up in her search for Hayley and what happened on the day of her disappearance. She has tried multiple efforts to try and find Hayley, such as Aboriginal trackers, private detectives, geographic profilers, and clairvoyants, to assist with the development of this case. Unfortunately, the disappearance of Hayley still remains unsolved. In more recent years, a special crime squad has been assigned to Hayley's case, and these detectives actually specifically work to try and solve cold cases just like Hayley's. To make the next lot of information a little bit easier, I've kind of separated it into years and months of when it happened. So now we're going to talk about the leads and the evidence that I found for this case. I'd also like to note that a lot of these leads and evidence that the police did find never really went anywhere, which is really sad. In 2000, police received a report from a hitchhiker saying that two men had actually tried to coax him into a car when he was hitchhiking. This happened only 6 days before Hayley's disappearance. Police investigated into this claim, but they were unable to produce any further leads. At this time, claims were beginning to surface saying that two brothers who were shearers said that they knew something about the crime. Reports had said that one of the brothers claimed to know where Hayley's grave was and where the shovel was that was used to dig the grave. Both of the brothers had been interviewed by the police, but they both had alibis for the time of Hayley's disappearance, and therefore they were ruled out as suspects. A few years later, police interview another two rouseabouts regarding their involvement with the disappearance of Hayley. These men were said to have been overheard discussing details of Hayley's disappearance in a hotel. Police have also ruled these men out as suspects. Also at this time, Hayley's mother, Margaret Dodd, she actually requested that a cold case review would be done of Hayley's case. Later the same year, police interview a new suspect. This man was actually reported by his former wife after she found newspaper clippings about Hayley's disappearance. Claims circled saying that he actually had a premonition of a woman being raped and murdered and dragged into the bushes on the day that Hayley disappeared. Police conducted forensic tests on the man's car, but this didn't lead anywhere further. After this time, police had one main suspect. His name was Robin David McCartney, and I will discuss reasons to believe that he was involved in Hayley's disappearance in more detail later on in the video when I discuss the suspects for this case. Hayley's parents, in a desperate attempt to try and find answers, actually went and visited Robin David McCartney 4 times while he was in prison. McCartney had requested a meeting with Hayley's parents because he claimed that he had information regarding Hayley's disappearance. Although during these meetings he denied having any involvement in Hayley's case and he refused to comment on the matter. He did name another person that he believed that was responsible for murdering Hayley, and he also said this person was responsible for the murder of Lalita Horseman. This murder happened in December, the same year that Hayley disappeared. I believe this is a bit sketchy because he was actually in prison at the time for Lalita Horseman's murder, and to me it seems like that he was trying to put the blame on someone else so that he could hopefully get out of prison for what he had done. But I still find it weird that he would claim that he knew information about Hayley's disappearance and then deny that he was involved in any way. So about a month later, McCartney actually sent Margaret Dodd a graphic police video that displayed footage of police uncovering Lalita Horseman's body. Apparently he was given access to this tape as he was trying to appeal his conviction, but how did the police even allow someone like that in his position to send that video to Hayley's mother? That's so messed up to even think that he has put the Dodd family through that much trauma through seeing that video. And when Margaret actually received the video, she severed all contact with McCartney and forwarded that video to the police. Not long after, in April, detectives impounded and forensically examined 2 cars that belonged to McCartney at the time of Hayley's disappearance. The case of Hayley Dodd was then looked into by Scotland Yard criminal profiler. He conducted an informal geographical assessment of the case and a few other cold cases that happened in Western Australia. Around 2 years later, there was 2 farmers that came forward to the police. They claimed that reports made in 2005 regarding Hayley's disappearance were never followed up. The report said that tattered clothing was found about 50 kilometres northeast of Badingara, which is not far from the place that Hayley was last sighted back in 1999. Police said they would look into the report and forensically examine the clothing to determine if they belonged to Hayley. I couldn't really find any further information regarding this, but reports did say that the police failed to actually notify Hayley's family in regards to these pieces of clothing and the results of these tests. Through my research, I did find that the Dodd family really wasn't too impressed with how the police managed the case. In 2010, a released prisoner came forward to police claiming that McCartney had actually confessed to murdering Hayley, and he claimed that McCartney knew the whereabouts of Hayley's body. Police investigated these claims, but McCartney still denies any involvement in Hayley's disappearance, and police were unable to find any physical evidence that linked him to this case. 3 years later, this case was actually reopened by cold case detectives, and they have been working on trying to solve the disappearance of Hayley since then. The Special Crimes Squad on the reopened case within their investigation returned to a property in Badingara after a re-examination uncovered significant evidence about the disappearance. This property was less than a kilometre from where Hayley had last been sighted on the day of her disappearance. The former owner of this property has recently become a suspect. His name is Francis John Wark. He is currently in prison for raping and kidnapping a woman in rural Queensland. I will discuss this man in more detail when we get into the suspects. So Wark sold the property only about 4 months after Hayley had disappeared. The most interesting part that I find about his involvement is that the woman that he raped and kidnapped was actually hitchhiking at the time of the crime. I would also like to note that this same property was actually searched around the time of Hayley's disappearance, but police were unable to find any evidence. When they re-examined this area, forensic police actually used a ground radar. This allowed them to penetrate the ground to look for objects that had been buried underneath the ground. Their investigation did not find any new evidence that linked Hayley to this area. Now we will discuss in more detail the two main suspects for this case. So the first suspect, his name was Robin David McCartney. He is a man that I talked about earlier who was serving life in prison for the murder of Lolita Horseman. Lolita was murdered in Geraldton in December in 1999, which was the same year that Hayley disappeared. This happened only 5 months after Hayley's disappearance. McCartney has been considered a suspect in Hayley's disappearance for a long time, but police were unable to prosecute him for this crime. As I said earlier, around 2010, a former prisoner came forward to police saying that McCartney had actually confessed to murdering Hayley. He said that he killed Hayley as she refused to have sex with him. This prisoner also claimed that McCartney knew the whereabouts of Hayley's body. This prisoner looked around McCartney's cell when he was actually sick and taken to hospital one time. He claimed that he found newspaper clippings that related to Hayley's disappearance stuck to the wall of his cell. Police actually raided McCartney's cell on 2 different occasions. A picture of Hayley's mum, Margaret, was also discovered taped to the wall in his cell. This picture had holes stabbed into Margaret's face. This makes him seem pretty dodgy, but police have been unable to obtain any evidence that links his involvement with Hayley's disappearance. McCartney actually died in 2016 from bowel cancer. This makes it a little bit harder for police to try and solve this case. They will never get a statement from him confessing to his involvement with Hayley's disappearance. As horrible as it is, police are hoping to discover the body of Hayley, as this would assist in finding the person behind her disappearance. It would also provide closure for Hayley's family. The second suspect that I have also mentioned is a man named Francis John Wark. He is currently serving a 12-year sentence for the kidnapping and rape of a young woman as she was hitchhiking. As I mentioned earlier, Wark actually lived in Badingara, which is not far from the place that Hayley was last sighted. In fact, his property was less than 1 kilometre away from the location where Hayley was last ever seen. What is sketchy about this is that he moved from his home in Badingara to Queensland less than 4 months after Hayley's disappearance. Police said that he was questioned at the time of Hayley's disappearance, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He denied having any involvement with her disappearance, and they never really investigated further. In 2013, his old property was the focus of a major police investigation, and that's where they were using the groundbreaking radars to see if there was anything buried underground. In recent years, the detectives of the Special Crimes Squad have notified Francis John Wark that there is a warrant for his arrest over the alleged murder of Hayley. In my research, I found that once Wark is charged, he will appear in a Queensland court for an extradition hearing for the assumed murder of Hayley Marie Dodd. If police are successful with extraditing Wark, he will then be taken to Western Australia to be charged with the crime. Police have spent numerous years investigating Wark's involvement and are hopeful that he will be prosecuted. Out of all of this, it was really good to see that the cold case detectives that were working on this case were actually able to find more evidence and were able to re-examine old information and produce a new suspect for this case. And the only theory for this case is really heartbreaking, but police believe that Hayley was murdered on the day of her disappearance or close to that day, and her body was dumped nearby. Detectives are still seeking information regarding the whereabouts of Hayley's body, and they urge anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers, and I'll leave the information on the screen. I feel like both the suspects for this case have numerous factors that could link to their involvement in Hayley's disappearance. These guys are both bad people, they were both already in jail for crimes unrelated, and police have significant reason to believe that they were involved with the disappearance of Hayley back in 1999. Although I personally believe that Francis John Wark, which was the second suspect I talked about, I believe that he could be behind this crime. If you guys have any more information about this case, I would love you to leave that in the comments. Also, let me know who you believe could be behind Hayley's disappearance that happened more than 18 years ago. And that's all the information I have for the case of Hayley Marie Dodd and her disappearance. This is such a heartbreaking story, and I hope that in the future this case can become solved to provide closure for the family. I cannot imagine what they have gone through. And also, if you have any suggestions for other cases that you'd like me to do, then you can leave those down in the comments. And thank you for watching. Bye!